and older lesbians and dykes who have moved us, changed us, made a difference. Who better to receive this award today than Lesbian Connection? Many of us have read and depended upon this historic lesbian institution for the last 40 years, and it has been central to the survival and celebration of lesbian lives and culture. The early issues of Lesbian Connection cost around $110 to produce and send out to a small group of women called, very appropriately, the Ambitious Amazons. Today it costs around $85,000 to send out 18,000 copies to women all over the globe. And also what I'm reading this, so I'm not really sure what comes next, but I just want to say I know that many women get this free if they cannot afford it. It's always been part of their foundation. Lesbian Connection has always been dedicated to grassroots activism. It's always struck to its guiding principle that material should come from the community and that this information should be circulated free of charge to those who need it. There it goes. Margie Lesher was one of the founders of Lesbian Connection, and we are delighted that she's here to receive the award today. I'm now going to hand the mic over to Erin Petrie from Out TV, who will give the award away.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here among new friends and older friends, not in age, just in time, including Elise Chenier, who was prof at SFU when I went there in my 40s. And I thought perhaps you would enjoy this, and some of you would like to learn more about Margie. There is a wonderful chapter on lesbian press in a book called Women in American Journalism, A New History by Jan Witt. It was published in 2008 by the University of Michigan, and you can learn a lot more about the background of her work in the lesbian press and in American journalism. Congratulations. It was a very interesting article to read. And now, on behalf of BoldFest and Out TV, we'd like to present you with the Bold Woman of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Okay, Pat said I had to speak. That's not in my job description, but I'll do my best. Of course, first of all, I want to say we should take a moment to thank Pat and Claire for 10 years of this wonderful lesbian event. When we started LC, one of our goals was to be able to have a network where women could find out about the lesbian events that were going on. Because we had tried to plan a conference for lesbians and found it almost impossible to get the word out. This was back in 1973. So after the conference, I had the idea, well, let's put together a newsletter and let lesbians find out about things. We knew that there were women's publications and some lesbian publications in big cities like Toronto, Chicago, Boston, but we figured there's more little cities like Lansing, where I'm from, and there was nothing there for the lesbians. So we decided to start a newsletter. We weren't writers, so we figured make it a forum, have the readers write it for us. So we created a collective, called ourselves the Ambitious Amazons. We self-funded the first several issues. Part of being a collective was we had to all donate money to pay to send the issues out. One woman donated $25 to put a 17-word classified into Ms. magazines at the back, and that got the word out. And then in 1974, in October, we mailed out our first 400 copies to lesbians around the country and the world. That first issue included things like reviews of Lavender Jane Loves Women, Ruby Fruit Jungle, news that Elaine Noble had been elected as the first out lesbian state representative in the state of Massachusetts. This was before Harvey Milk, by the way. And we also had an announcement that Olivia Records was putting out a 45 with Meg Christian and Chris Williamson. Also in that very first issue, we had a short article about that conference we had put on and mentioned what women had written down as their occupation on their registration form. And some of them included things like revolutionary, separatist, and gainfully unemployed. One of our challenges back then was the fact that women were, of course, a little closeted. And some that were closeted were afraid that we were an FBI plot. So getting lesbians to write down their full name and address on a piece of paper and sign up for a lesbian magazine was a little difficult. But we continued. We had a big banner that said Lesbian Connection, and we loved taking it to like women's conferences, Women in the Law, and we had to often fight to get that banner up on the wall because they were like freaked out by it. But we managed, and when we sit at our table, there's not a whole lot for women to see, so we figure we have to call them over. So our line is, do you get Lesbian Connection? Well, a lot of the women would go, why are you asking me? How did she know? In 1975, we began our first list of contact dykes, who are women that would put their name and contact information in the issue, so lesbians who were traveling or moving to an area could find other lesbians. The first list had 15 lesbians on it. The current list has about 1,100 lesbians, and they cover almost 30 different countries, 46 different states, and 9 Canadian provinces.
What are the missing states? What are the missing states?
I think North Dakota might be one. I'll have to check. In the beginning, as I said, we were self-funded, and then women started sending in donations. We weren't spending much money, as Pat said. It was our budget for the first year was $865. Partly because we spent our time sneaking into offices at night to use their typewriter, and people would somehow show up at our with reams of paper that they somehow had found somewhere. We put on, in addition to doing the newsletter, we put on monthly, we call them statewide gatherings of lesbians, and they were dances and potluck and occasional softball game and sometimes a meeting. And after a year and a half of doing that, we raised enough money so we could buy our own Selectric typewriter. And then we may even manage to get a separate ball for the Selectric typewriter so we could have 2 fonts. It was big time. At the time, collating the issue, which was putting all the pages together and stapling them shut, was all done by hand. Sometimes for an issue, we have 40 lesbians would show up over a course of 2 weeks of doing this. But actually, it was a wonderful way for lesbians to meet each other because they could come, do an activity, and they didn't have to talk, and they could just listen to other, and it was a lot of, some lesbians actually, met each other through that. In 1981, we began paying all of our workers the grand amount of $2 an hour. And we were thrilled that we were finally able to pay. And we paid everybody who worked on it. Our philosophy was and still is, an hour's work is an hour's work, whether you're an editor or a collator or just cleaning the office. So we all get paid the same basic hourly rate. It took us about 3 years, and we managed to make it up to $3.60 an hour, which was minimum wage. And then we could sort of be legal. Some of the topics that have been discussed in the early years were lots about custody battles. That was women fighting for custody was the legal issue of that time. Also, the purges in the Army and the Navy of lesbians. And there were writings about the 12-step programs, being an incest survivor, abusive relationships, whether there should be lesbian-only or women-only spaces. And then, of course, Michigan Festival. There were some pros and cons about that, and controversies that happened there that were always fun to read about. Some of the more recent topics, they've sort of taken a different turn. We have lesbians in our pets, lesbians in our gardens. Your first lesbian crush, whether Elsie should still be free. Some women feel like that some of the women who don't donate are taking advantage, and they voice their opinions. Our feeling is Elsie belongs to the readers. Only they know what their situation is with money, and we don't want anyone to feel guilty. We want it to be available to all lesbians, regardless of their situations. Of course, after the How We Met, we have the lesbian weddings. And then there's stories about the passings has become one of a lot of people's favorite section in an odd sort of way, where we remember women who have passed on. Currently, we have 7 full-time staff and about half a dozen part-time. We own 2 buildings where we do the work. Our mailing list has stabilized, and we print about 18,000 issues, as Pat said. Our annual budget now is over $500,000, and we've still survived almost totally on donations women send us. We get a little money from advertising, but mostly it's from the donations, that the $5, $10, and some. Actually, we wrote in our last issue that we're having some financial difficulties, and a week later we got a call from a woman out east who said, well, we had said that we had cut back on some of the staff benefits because of this. And she said, well, how much did you cut back? And I said, well, I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. She said, well, call me back. So I looked it up, and I called her back, and I said, we cut back $4,900 to save money on our benefits. And she said, can I send you a check, and could I do it in 2 installments? Yeah, I think we can handle that. Also, a lot of women have very generously listed Elsie in their wills, and that has helped along the way too. But still, reaching new lesbians, reaching young lesbians, it's always a challenge. The women's bookstores are disappearing. There aren't as many good conferences that there used to be, so it's still a struggle. It's just 40 years, but we're still going. Sometimes I'm asked why I think Elsie managed to still be alive. Well, I think it's because it's more than a magazine. It's really the grassroots lesbian network. It belongs to all of us. And our lesbian community is truly a powerful community. So I'd have to say that that award really doesn't belong to me. It really belongs to all people, all of the lesbians who have made ELSI what it is. So I'd like to take a moment right now and ask if there's anyone here, whoever's had an article or letter printed in ELSI, if they would please stand up and we'll give them a hand. How about if you've also had an announcement or an ad? Have you, please stand up. Keep. What about if you've been a CD or if you used a CD over the years? Please stand up. What if you've put ELSI in your will? What if you've ever donated to ELSI? Please stand up. What if you've ever read ELSI? Hey, or heard about it? Please stand up and give yourselves a